What's up guys, Cameron here from Drums and Drams, and today we have another Scotch Sunday whiskey review, this time focusing on the 12-year Sherry Oak expression from the Macallan. This is sort of a flagship bottling in the Macallan lineup, and also more broadly, it's sort of a flagship bottling across the industry as a whole. When you think about high-end, high-priced Scotch with a following that transcends whiskey enthusiasts and breaks into that kind of general public or pop culture kind of thing, you think of the Macallan, you think of Balvenie, but I think the Macallan is probably the top pick of that kind of whiskey, which is why the price tag, I believe, is $90 to $100+ for this 12-year bottling, which is crazy when you look across the industry. That is a very high price tag, and I think they get away with it because of the name recognition, because of kind of the reputation they've built for themselves over the years, a reputation built on the backs of sherry casks that were of a higher quality, not these Oloroso sherry season casks that we're getting from them today. But I don't want to rag on the Macallan too hard before we get to actually nosing and tasting this thing, but I think it is worth setting the stage by saying these kinds of things. And yes, I have tasted some 12-year-old Macallan from the 90s. I've tasted stuff distilled in the 90s that when I tasted was 18 years old and bottled in 2012. These are all fantastic. I mean, truly special scotches. And the stuff nowadays, certainly with those seasoned casks, is expectedly not going to live up to the Macallan of yesteryear, but with this kind of price tag, things are just kind of getting out of hand. Anyways, with that said, let me give you the particulars on this bottle. This is bottled at 43% ABV or 86 proof. It is natural color, so let's give them credit where credit's due. And presumably chill filtered here, although I don't know if that is 100% confirmed, but you can pretty much assume that it is if it's not telling us non-chill filtered. Just a quick little aside, this is not an ad of any sort. I'm using this Bennuaine glass, which is one that has interested me for a while. I've used it for different American whiskeys. I find that it does pretty well with those. And now we're gonna test it on this 12-year Sherry Oak. Very expensive glass. I will put the details in the description of this video if you want to check this thing out. Let's see how this glass, how this whiskey do together. Here we go, Macallan 12 Sherry Oak on the nose. All right, first impression here is that I'm getting a lot of rubber on this. And this is not an uncommon note, rubber, sulfur, some of these things that are very savory and sometimes very unpleasant as well. Not uncommon on some sherry cask finishes or, sherry cask maturations. But in this case, I feel like there are a lot of really nice sherried Scotch notes underneath this, those dry fruits, that kind of, that kind of fruit cake, Christmas spice, all those kinds of things. They are present, but I think they're just masked in this case by this rubbery note. I wouldn't go so far as to say that there's a sulfured note on this, but I'm very sensitive to rubber notes in whiskey, whether it be Scotch or American whiskey. When you look at things like George Dickel, or you look at things like some toasted barrel finishes that just get really rubbery, really char forward. This has that to me, and unfortunately it is kind of unpleasant. Now, besides that, I don't want to keep harping on this rubberiness. There is a pretty nice ginger note that starts to appear on this. So I would say that this ginger note is becoming more prominent. The rubber falls back as you kind of acclimate your senses to it. And this ginger becomes the top note with these supporting dried cherry fruit notes underneath it. The one unfortunate thing about those kind of nicer sherried red fruit dry notes that you're getting is that it feels almost artificial. There's almost this artificial sweetness. Reminds me of like sucralose or aspartame, which I can't drink diet drinks and those low sugar drinks. I can't do it. I'd rather have all natural sugar, because I think the taste of some of those false sweeteners, fake sweeteners is just kind of weird. But let's go to the palate now and see what we get. Here we go, cheers. Okay, so the palate is definitely better than the nose for me. The balance of the palate is much better. The development makes more sense. Surprisingly, this is an overly hot whiskey. At 43%, there's a lot of unfounded spice and unfounded ethanol that makes this drink hotter. But because this whiskey lacks in some other ways, I actually think those elements help make it more exciting and kind of make up for its faults elsewhere. And so whereas normally I would say, oh, it's a little overly hot, even at this low ABV, it's kind of strange. In this case, I'm actually going to give it kudos for this because it keeps things moving along and it kind of distracts you from this rubber note that is present on the palate, but certainly not to the level that it was on the nose. And the other thing is, I know I talked about this glass, the drinking experience out of this kind of flared lip on the glass is fantastic. I really like the way that this falls into your mouth, falls over the tongue. It kind of coats the mouth a little bit better, and it's providing for a more full drinking experience. So I like it. I mean, it is a very expensive glass. It is what it is, but I think these are hand blown or handmade, and so you kind of get what you pay for in this case. All right, back to the whiskey, second sip. Remarkable difference for me from nose to palate. I don't know, I can't come to terms with that in my head, just how different these things are. Second sip I love. The front of the palate is all those raisin, Christmas cake, all those dry dark fruits. That is the front of the palate. As it rolls back, mid palate I got some artificial sweetness again, and it's coming off, in this case, a little bit like, there's almost like a bread pudding kind of note, but it's like bread pudding made with fake sugar or something. And that's the mid palate with a little bit of that ginger note as well that I discussed on the nose. And as we get into the finish, yeah, it's a nice, pleasant finish. I think it's fruit centric on the finish, sherry centric, which is nice. Not too much of that fake sweetener hanging around. And of course, the spice here, which I said is a little overdone, but for a good result in this one, that is lingering as well. So we're gonna do one final sip and then we're gonna wrap this thing up. Wrapping up this video for this Macallan 12-year Sherry Oak. First and foremost, is this thing worth the money? Not in a million billion years should you pay $90 to $100 for this. At least in my book, I think there's better sherry finished or sherry exclusive maturation whiskey on the market for a lesser price point. Think you can do better than this Macallan. I do like the fact that the palate is better than the nose, but the nose to me matters a lot on a whiskey, and the fact that it's so disjunct, so rubbery and kind of weird, it feels like there's faults in the whiskey and there's this fake sugar thing. Not a big fan of that. However, if I were at a bar, if I was just drinking this whiskey, not thinking about it, out of a rocks glass, which is what a lot of people are presumably doing with Macallan 12, then I would have no problem sitting and drinking this. And it keeps your attention because it has that additional spice that is kind of out of character for a 43% ABV. So all in all, it's a fine whiskey. It is not my first choice. When this bottle is gone, I will not be buying another one of them because I just don't see the need. There are plenty of other great whiskeys on the market, but I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Drop me a comment below if you have some opinions on this Macallan 12-year Sherry Oak. Again, not a bad whiskey. I won't say no to a pour of this. It's not like that. But I just think at the price point, with the name recognition behind this, you've got to do better. You've got to do better. I know we're not working with great casks anymore. We're seasoning these things, but at some point, the quality has to match the price, and this, to me, it's not even close. So thanks for checking out this video, guys. Check out this Bennuaine glass, very interesting stuff. And again, I promise this is not an ad. I'm genuinely curious to try lower proof scotches in this glass, and it works very well. Great drinking experience, very dainty, very expensive, all that kind of good stuff. Cheers. I'll see you guys next time here on Drums and Drams, and thanks for tuning in to another Scotch Sunday.